Alright guys, what's going on? Coming back after a pretty good race on the Bahrain Grand Prix. Ended up being able to finish in P8 for 4 points in the driver standings. Dan ticked him, unfortunately, just landing outside of the points range with Yuki Tsunoda there in P10. Currently sitting in 5th place with our 4 points for the constructor standings. With the grid looking pretty good with Ferrari in the lead, Red Bull behind, Alpine, Mercedes, and then Unity Motorsports in P5 for constructors. So yeah, that was a pretty good first race, getting used to the car. And then one of the things I noticed was that the wear and tear on the engine parts is a lot more compared to a full 20-some race season. So we'll be expecting some of the wear and tear probably around race 4 or 5, but we'll worry about that when we get there. We had about 2 or 3 upgrades come in between Bahrain and this one. It's going to be Australia. So we ended up dropping down, I believe, 1 position or 2, I don't quite remember, on our vehicle performance. But need to work on the chassis there a little bit and get some more upgrades going. That way we can get this car back up there in contention for points. We don't want to end up falling out of points against AlphaTauri and Haas there. But yeah, we're gonna go right into qualifying for the Albert Park circuit. So we'll see you guys back when we start our qualifying. Alright guys, what's going on? We made it through practice, and Australia was actually pretty rough. It was a lot different. It was a lot more different than F121 than I expected, especially with some of the backside of the track. Like the right-hander chicane along the back doesn't exist anymore, and then the left-hander S curve before the last few corners is a lot more high speed. And I kept going wide there in practice on that larger S curve. So hopefully we managed to get through those turns enough during practice to hopefully get a decent time here in qualifying. So we're gonna dive right in. Alright, the second run was pretty rough here. We ended up hitting a curb too hard, so they have to repair the underbody. So that's going to cut into our time here for qualifying. We're going to swap over to a new set of softs. and then we'll get back out there to see if we can improve our time. All right, so Australia was pretty rough. We thought we had a pretty decent time, but the last second runners basically knocked us out. Dan Tickton even had some issues and is starting in P20. Alpha Tauri, Haas, and McLaren, Alfa Romeo, these guys, they're all running 118, 120s, and I'm stuck back here at a 123. Australia is definitely a big improvement from F121. And nothing but positive vibes during the race here. We can only gain positions. It's just, it'll be a hope that myself and my teammate can get up high enough and score some points after this race. So that's pretty much the qualifying. We had some trouble at on the last few laps because Daniel Ricciardo was coming out of the pits, and right as we were trying to take the apex of the first turn, Daniel Ricciardo was right there, so we had to hit the brakes, and that basically ruined our chance of getting out of Q1, and that's why our time was so slow, and no improvements on the following lap on those sets of softs. So we're gonna be tailing the grid at the start of the race with Williams and Aston Martin. So we did get a chassis and aero upgrade for this race, but we're hoping that race number 3 will come in handy with the next chassis weight reduction package. So on to the race, and let's hope for a better race than we had qualifying. So we'll see you guys then.
You can hear the Australian fans roaring as they line the track here in Albert Park. Welcome to Melbourne, and the roar from the crowd can only mean one thing. It's race day. We go racing today then in the state of Victoria, where the drivers have 14 corners and 3.28 miles to navigate at an average lap speed of around 120 miles per hour. The close proximity of the barriers make accidents inevitable, and recent history shows us that a safety car is not at all out of the question. It's time to take a look at our starting grid for today's race. Charles Leclerc lines up on pole position, and the smooth operator Carlos Sainz completes the front row. Looking down the rest of the grid, we have Perez, Hamilton, George Russell and Norris, Fernando Alonso, Ocon, Ricciardo and Pierre Gasly, Bottas, Verstappen, Guan Yu Zhou and Magnussen, Tsunoda, Mick Schumacher, Sebastian Vettel and Lance Stroll, Albon, Ticktum, Latifi and Johnson. Which of these talented drivers will come out on top today? Natalie Pinkham joins me once again in the commentary box. It's fantastic to have you with us today. I'm curious though, how do you think the drivers stop those pre-race nerves from becoming overwhelming when you're lining up on the grid?
Well, I imagine they'll be starting to feel the adrenaline as they anticipate the rundown into turn 1, a bit like preparing to go into battle. The unknown situation will bring nerves, but that's a good thing. It'll keep them focused on the moment and on their surroundings as we build towards the start of the Grand Prix.
After the points finished last race, let's aim to keep that momentum going.
Alright, as you guys can see as the lineup, Unity is going to be starting out in the back of the pack, so we're going to take our time into the first turn of Albert Park here. Try to take it easy. If we can get a few positions off the start, we'll go for that. And then hold on to the outside line and then inside line for turn 2. But we'll have to wait and see. We're going to go ahead and take a look at our race strategy here. I don't know why it's wanting us to run soft tire and then hards for the rest of the race. I'm going to go ahead and see if we can... Alright guys, pretty rough starting lineup for this weekend, as we've had a rough weekend so far, starting in last place with Dan Ticktum directly in front of us. And hopefully we can get this race going for good. So 5 red lights and we are off. And like I just said, see if we can get a good launch here, but we're going to go ahead and take it easy on this first corner, try not to make any dire moves. And after the first 2 turns, actually, it seems like we're not pushing the pedal to the metal enough. You can see him about a half second behind, and it's still climbing. So I definitely wasn't ready, and I don't believe my mediums were warm enough for the start of this race, as I don't have the traction control turned off, so I can't do the burnouts to get a little bit more extra traction from the rear tires. As Dan Ticktum regains position against Nicholas Latifi, and we're still straggling there in the back as we get in grips with the car and get those tires back up to the peak temperature that they need to be at in order to regain some of that ground that we lost. Now just over a second here as we come to the S-curve that I was talking about in these last few corners. We wait late on the brakes, coming up pretty close to Nicholas Latifi, but not too much to the ram into the back of him. And not too close enough to try and make a move here. So yeah, it's going to be rounding out the end of lap 1. And yeah, trying to basically use these first few laps to get in tune, get used to the momentum, and get toe off of the other drivers in front of us as we wait for DRS to activate on the next lap of lap 3. So basically lap 2 consisted of me trying to stay behind Nick Latifi's toe and try to catch up and make a move. Moving on to lap 12 here is actually when we decide to go into the pits, and we actually are the first ones to make a pit stop. Other than Mick Schumacher and Valtteri Bottas, they made it earlier in lap 11, so we're maybe the 3rd person to make our pit stop here. And I was surprised that a lot of the front runners hadn't made their pit stops yet. They had a little bit of trouble on the front right there, as the gap has increased by over, I believe, 11 seconds now. That we're behind 12.3 seconds behind Valtteri Bottas on the start of lap 13. Moving on to the end of lap 13, start of lap 14. A lot of people, you could see that they went in for their pit stops. And unfortunately, we were not fast enough through these corners to gain some positions, as we're still about 2.5 seconds or less than behind Lance Stroll here with Alexander Albon in P20. Dan Ticktum making it up to P12 as he has yet to pit on his set of medium tires. And moving on to lap 18. now, where Dan Tictum ended up having an engine failure, causing a yellow flag towards the end of Sector 2 here. Very unlucky for Tictum, as that doesn't help with our points, but we're slotted up to P18 at the time of that yellow flag, trying to still catch up to Lance Stroll. And it's going to be like this for the next few laps, is trying to close the gap between us and Lance Stroll, with Sebastian Vettel close behind, about the same distance we are behind Lance Stroll here. This we're coming up to about halfway through the race. Finally catch up to him a few laps later at lap 22. Less than a quarter of a second behind him, as we're making a few mistakes here. But at this point, Valtteri Bottas has already made his one and only pit stop from the softs to the mediums, so he's closing in on us, as you can probably see him in the mirrors here. As we lose a little bit of time on the back straight, trying to carry as much of the speed as we can into the S-curve, so we can try to make a move on the inside of Lance Stroll. Little bit of contact on the tires here as we make a move on him. We swap to the onboard from Lance Stroll as we make a move on him, and Valtteri Bottas close behind. A little bit of fight here as Lance Stroll holds the inside line. We end up squeezing him a little bit too hard here, and try to hold our position against Lance Stroll in P17 as we round up the end of lap 22 and moving on to the start of lap 23. A few laps after, we're moving on to George Russell on the start of lap 28, and he ends up finishing the race off with a DNF with another engine failure for this race. DNF claiming Dan Tictum and then George Russell. So yeah, here's the onboard from George Russell here. As he crosses the finish line, coming up to the first turn, you start hearing his engine die down and he moves out to the side. And yeah. Leaving the possible podium up to Carlos Sainz, Charles Leclerc, and Max Verstappen, with Lewis Hamilton close behind. And the final lap mayhem, we have both Sebastian Vettel and Lance Stroll in the Aston Martins behind us. Sebastian Vettel fights for position on the outside, and Lance Stroll makes a move on the inside, loses a little bit of momentum there as he spins out, and we're actually going 3 wide off of this fast section with the DRS. So you see Vettel there on the outside and Stroll there on the inside. Stroll pushes over to the curb. Lance had to back off, or Vettel had to back off. And shortly after Stroll spun out, we get into position. We end up going a little bit wide and spinning out. Here's going to be the onboard from Lance, or third person view, as we almost get back on track and get hit by Lance Stroll here.
Over. Take care of the car on the way in.
Another superb Australian Grand Prix comes to an end then, and it's a thoroughly deserved victory. Natalie Pinkham, how do you think they were able to set themselves apart today?
I really feel the track layout, combined with the track temperatures we saw today, suited their car. These cars come alive when the tyres are just at the right temperature, and the driver did a great job managing that as well. They just look so comfortable out there. It's like anything, it always looks so easy when it all just clicks.
here we are, a team that is no stranger to the podium, taking their place on top once again. A sublime race today, and a stunning win for Ferrari. Let's have a look then at the driver's standings. Carlos Sainz manages to take control of the championship, securing the top spot with today's points. Let's focus on the driver of the day. Natalie Pinkham, come on, who do you pick?
Often, my go-to would be a driver who's managed to pull off an especially impressive feat during the race. However, in this instance, I was more impressed by Max Verstappen's solid, clean driving throughout the event.
Let's move on to the constructors. Ferrari continue to extend the gap at the top of the table. There was also a strong showing from the McLaren team today as they make their way up the standings. After an event like that, who knows what the sport has in store for us next time out? Be sure to join us once again as we continue to bring you all the excitement of Formula One.
All right, so there we have it. A pretty tough race. As you guys can see by the end of the race, we're getting there on our settings. Latency is still there. The graphics, I can bump those up a bit and see if that'll help. But yeah, I have a hardwired connection to the internet. I'm running the 2060 graphics card for RTX, and I'm only running my recording software other than this game. But yeah, we dropped down to 6th for constructors because we didn't score any points. We didn't really get that lucky with qualifying at all either. And I dropped down to 10th place in the driver's standings with 4 points, tied with Daniel Ricciardo. So yeah, Carlos Sainz leading the driver's standings and Ferrari leading a Red Bull in the constructors. That's going to be your Australian GP, and we got a lot of work to do with the next race being Miami. So hopefully we can get some R&D and a lot of money rolling in, so we can get more parts put on the car. So stay tuned for the next episode. Miami GP is going to be our home race in the USA. We're going to go ahead and swap out the helmet for that race for our home GP. So we'll see you guys in the next episode, and hopefully you guys enjoy the video.